6, so I want to call this meeting to order. I apologize to our community and public for being a little bit late as our work session ran just a little bit over, but we were excited to hear from our principals and the work that they're doing to open our schools, and just seeing some of the wonderful examples both at the elementary level and the high school level to see the work that has gone on in the past 2 weeks. So we're grateful for that, and thank you to the entire team, and especially to Keith Richardson and Dr. Ruth Steininger for being with us this afternoon. Let's make sure that we have a quorum. I'm pretty sure that we do, but let me do a quick roll call of our board members. Mrs. Cash, Vice Chair Cash, is not with us this evening, as I indicated earlier during our work session. She is addressing some health issues and will not be with us, but is doing fine and will be with us at our later meeting, another meeting. So I will start with the roll call. Ms. Kushner.
I'm present. Thank you for that update on Ms. Cash. Chair Sutton.
Dr. Martin.
Here.
Mrs. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Haggerty.
Here.
Mrs. Mahaffey.
Here, Chair Sutton.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Here.
Mr. Fletcher.
Here.
All right. And so we are all here. We have a quorum. Mr. Bloomberg, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
All right. And of course, Superintendent Moore is here with us as well. So we have the complete leadership team minus Mrs. Cash. So if you all would stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag
Of the United States
of America. And to the republic for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you for that. That moves us to our information section. We will start with comments from the superintendent. Superintendent Moore.
Making sure I'm unmuted.
Right.
Good evening. You got me, right?
We got you.
Okay. The many challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic have tested all of us, especially our principals and assistant principals. They've been required to lead teachers, staff, students, and parents in learning how to approach an entirely different way of doing school, and yet continuing to be a steady influence during uncertain times. I am beyond proud of the wisdom and calm that they have displayed in rising to this challenge. There's never been a better time to celebrate outstanding principal leadership. That is why I am pleased to recognize the 2020-2021 finalists for Principal and Assistant Principal of the Year, which were announced last week. The principal finalists are Bob Grant of Washington Elementary, Keith Richardson of Knightdale High, Elena Ashburn of Broughton Magnet High, Mariah Walker of Hilburn Academy, and Winston Pierce of Farmington Woods Magnet Elementary. The assistant principal finalists are Chastity Hawkins of Carpenter Elementary, Sarah Bratton of Forest Pines Drive Elementary, Rodney Smith of Green Hope High, Monica Sawyer of Enloe Magnet High, and Leslie Blake of Millbrook Magnet Elementary. The finalists were voted on by principals and assistant principals across the district. They will be evaluated and based on an e-portfolio and a virtual interview. The finalists with the highest scores will be selected as the principal and assistant principal of the year. The winners will be named at a special celebration on October 1st. Congratulations to this inspiring group of leaders. Next, I would like to thank the hundreds of volunteers who have supported Chromebook and internet hotspot distribution during the past few weeks. Activate Good coordinated more than 500 community volunteers who have thus far logged more than 3,200 hours. To date, our families have collected about 37,000 devices. That simply would not have been possible without these volunteers, working alongside WCPSS staff members, facilitating safe and efficient distribution. One of our strategic plan core beliefs states that Wake County residents value a strong public school system and will partner to provide the support and resources to fully realize our shared vision and accomplish the mission. This is yet another example of our community stepping up to support the students and families of Wake County. My thanks to all. Finally, just a few words of praise and encouragement for our students, parents, and staff members as we move out of the orientation phase of the school year and into more focused instruction. I know it has been a major adjustment, but I also know that our innovative teachers and administrators are having many successes connecting with students and providing meaningful teaching and learning each day. Moving forward, our teachers and principals will learn from their experiences as well as from parent-student feedback to continuously improve how they deliver online instruction. For those who may be having challenges, whether it's internet access or difficulty setting into a daily routine, I ask that you maintain patience and stay in close contact with your child's teachers. They are committed to making sure every student has the opportunity to succeed in remote learning. If you're having trouble staying connected and you reach out to them, I certainly know that they will reach out to you. Despite these unusual circumstances, our core business hasn't changed: to provide students with relevant, rigorous, and meaningful instruction each day. That is our mission, our purpose, our pledge, regardless of whether it takes place in a school building or at home or in the online universe. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, for those comments. And I'll be brief in my comments. I certainly appreciate the opportunity that Superintendent Moore and I have to share on the various Fridays with the community through our press briefings. And so I want to leave this opportunity for board members. I do want to take a moment, though, to address what are some of the rumors that we have become about in the community about when and if we will return to school, if we'll return to school and face-to-face instruction by January 1, and some of you even heard about whether we will return this year. And I want to reiterate to those that are watching, to our public, that it is our plan to return to face-to-face instruction as soon as it is safe to do so. Safe for our students, for our parents, our faculty, and all of our staff. We are beginning what you will hear in tonight's meeting is the first introduction of the data that we are reviewing from our Duke Scientific Advisory Board. We'll hear from Superintendent Moore later in this meeting, and we will continue to review data and trends as we will use that information to help us make that decision as to when it is safe to return to school. That information will include, again, data, metrics that we will use to help us in that decision. It is our goal as a district to return soon, to hopefully do that in cohorts or groups of students, starting with our youngest and most vulnerable students first. Those plans may change, but right now that is our plan, but we cannot tell you when that will start, how that will start at this point, but we are certainly working to do so. And again, we will do that when it is safe and healthy, in a safe and healthy manner, as we continue to work through the many protocols and ensure that our teachers, our administrators, and those that are in our buildings are taking every precaution and it is safe to do so. So you, again, will continue to hear more about that as we go through this meeting and our future meetings, as we will be making some decisions in that regard, hopefully in the near future. With that, I'll turn it over to board members for additional comments. I'll start with Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I've been really short here. Every teacher has been asked to do something they've never done. We heard Ms. Steidinger talk about every principal is now a first-year principal in a virtual environment. Every teacher is having the same challenge, and I want to applaud them. I want to encourage our public to, when you see a teacher, pat them on the back, encourage them. They're having to do everything new. They're committed to it. My wife has been principal in a small homeschool a couple of days this week, And the structure for our grandchildren was certainly important. And, you know, it's 9:15. That's when you're in school. You're dressed, you're ready, you're got your materials prepared, and class is starting. And she observed just 2 teachers and their commitment to engage students and to be confident that that all of their students were engaged and participating and hadn't wandered off, even though they were in distant locations. So just shout out for our teachers and all of our support staff. Can't forget them. The frontline people who are making things happen for our children need to be applauded. And that's what I want to do right now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Fletcher. We appreciate those words of encouragement. Mrs. Johnson-Hosler.
Thank you very much. I feel like I should kind of be brief because both of you said it, and it was Mr. Fletcher was a lot brief than usual. So I'm going to just go with it and see where we land. Maybe it'll be brief, maybe it won't be. We'll surprise you. I certainly want to echo Superintendent Moore with Activate Good and the work that they've done. Having had the opportunity to go volunteer multiple times during this time, I also want to acknowledge that our transportation staff has been also working those sites as well, which I've loved getting to know them, taking a long list of questions, comments, and feedback from the transportation staff while doing the giveaway. So I also want to applaud our central services staff for being creative to keep our folks employed as long as we can. So certainly got lots of love from the parents and students who are picking up their devices. I know Ms. Mahaffey has said this before. I haven't had to use the help desk, but watching them, hands down, Ms. Gaddis, to your team for being extremely gracious and kind to folks who are coming to pick up devices, asking questions about devices, exchanging devices. Your team of folks have been amazing, and I've watched them answer those questions flawlessly, and people walk out feeling good. I also have had the opportunity to ask parents and students about their experience, because you all know I'm a talker. So while I'm signing out the device, I'm like, and how has it been for you? And we've shouted out our principals, our educators. I also want to shout out our students and parents. This is not easy, and we are all first-time virtual students and parents. And again, everybody gave me their list of complaints with a smile saying, I know it's hard, but thanks for asking. And it's just a reminder that sometimes it just helps to allow people to say what's happening for them, and certainly let them know that we get it, because a large part of the time people just want to be heard. Nobody expected me to have any grandiose answers. I also led with I don't have any answers, but they didn't ask that. They just wanted to be heard and to know that and I told them I was a school board member afterwards, but they just appreciated the ask and acknowledging that this is difficult. So hats off to our parents and our students who are also trying to struggle through, one, readjusting if they're like my kid to a structured day, but two, to our teachers, trying to push through. And like many of our colleagues, I can hear my husband teaching, I can hear my daughter's teachers teaching, and people are doing their best, and so are our students. So hats off to them and to everyone who's just trying to hold it down and get through this, and acknowledging that we all know, and again, having a kid at home, that this is not the best circumstances, but hang in there, and we will continue to listen and take under advisement. But we will also continue to try to take care of our entire school community by using our science to determine what's next. So hang in there. I know it's tough, and I'm happy to hear the complaints, although I might not have any answers. So I think that's my last thanks to folks. And thank you, Mr. Sutton, for laughing at my joke about being brief or not.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hosler. We appreciate you. Thank you for those words. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. And I want to recognize that in our work session, we heard from Dr. Ruth Steidinger, who was Wake County's current Principal of the Year and was nominated to the Regional Principal of the Year and made it to the state level. And although that honor went to a different principal, we are extremely proud of Dr. Steidinger here in District 8, and I know her Olive Chapel family is as well. Week 1 of formal learning has begun, including in the Mahaffey household, and it is different, it is challenging, and it can be hard. And we're hearing this from parents. This is a new learning environment, and we have amazing, amazing teachers. And as Superintendent Moore said, be sure to reach out to your child's teacher. We've had to for a few things, and it is a partnership that needs to be stronger this year than any other year. In addition to patience and grace, I'd say partnership is another term that we need to add to that list of school supplies for the year. And I am proud of what I see happening in our house when I peek in and see what's going on in the lessons. And my children seem, for the most part, engaged. And I'm hearing from other families that, again, it's an adjustment, and they're having to adjust. And sometimes those adjustments are difficult. And I just want to take the time and acknowledge that. And certainly this is not something that we hope to be doing long-term. As Chair Sutton said, we hope to be back in the building when it is safe and that in a healthy way. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. So again, I want to say thank you to all the staff that have led us through a successful orientation period and gotten us ready for the start of our regular instruction, our regular virtual instruction this week. I know it was a lot of lift for a lot of people, especially without a lot of lead time in terms of teacher work days and other training that we might have had we started the school year on its normal date instead of the new earlier date that the legislature gave us. So big thanks to them. I think it's also appropriate to thank all of the families that are adjusting to this new normal. So many of us on the board are parents with our own students in the public schools. We're going through these challenges as well. We're seeing some good stories, some success stories, and we're also seeing some things where we want to give our feedback. But just really want to thank everybody for working with us, being positive and constructive on how we can continue going forward. Mr. Sutton, I appreciate your comments at the beginning of the meeting because we are hearing a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff that comes back to us, phone calls I've had today from people about, well, I've heard this and I've heard that. I hope we can do more of like you're doing, coming in and clearing up where there is rumor or misinformation or innuendo out there. And I want us to be transparent, right? We have a lot of challenges. We saw from the schools, the private schools that have opened up, and I'm just going to call it out, the ones that have opened up for live instruction, we have seen positive COVID infections among staff, and more disturbingly, even among students. And that's a problem. And these are schools that were not reckless. They were not foolish. They put very specific safety protocols in place. And yet we've seen what that risk is. So as we go forward, I think we need to let everyone know about the precautions that we are taking, what we are tracking, what we are doing to keep our staff safe and to keep our kids safe going forward. Because I know there has been a lot of work, but a lot of that work doesn't always get out there to everybody. So I'd encourage you and the superintendent to keep doing your weekly meetings. I think the more information we get out there about, some of what we're doing to make sure that everyone feels safe and confident that when we do come back for live instruction, it's going to be a good experience for everyone. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Much appreciated. Mrs. Scott.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair Sutton. I will also try to keep my comments brief. Public comments this evening, and for people who are not aware, there are different ways that you can access those and read those, but there are over 34 pages, or there are 34 pages of public comments. And again, I think that this highlights how dedicated our community is to serving our students and how involved they are. And I did take the time to read through all of these comments, and there are a wide variety of opinions on different matters, but it's important that with that we see them. And I encourage people to read the experience of other people as well. That's how we come together, is when we can have these conversations and listen to people who might have a very different opinion on matters. But that's how we find solutions, is paying attention to those words and coming together. This past Friday, I was able to help with some produce delivery in Eastern Wake. And since I was there and other volunteers knew that I was with the schools, you know, in air quotes, a few students that were normally out playing, they noticed that, oh, there's usually kids outside playing, but they were inside because they were engaged. And so many families did already have their devices. They were able to connect with hotspots. And I just thought it was really great to see the success, to see these efforts working, and to see the access that our students had. And even overheard classes when we, you know, came to the door, we could hear the Google classrooms. And so that is good. And I recognize that it's a lot because I have 2 elementary age students as well. And the past 2 days have been pretty intense in our house. But I echo what my colleagues are saying, because when I hear their teachers, the care and the reassuring that they're showing our students, it is phenomenal. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our teachers and to our instructional assistants who are just going above and beyond to reassure their students, to reassure families that things that are going to be okay, that we are going to get through this. And I do want to extend my gratitude to to our CNS department and employees, and to be able to work quickly. It was wonderful that the USDA extended the waivers so that we could continue providing meals to all children through December. That's phenomenal, and I'm glad to see that. And I know that was a big shift in planning and making sure that moved forward. So just a huge thank you to everybody, to our families, and especially to our teachers. I see what you're doing, and I'm so thankful for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. And like my colleagues, I want to begin with a thank you. Thank you to the students, parents, the community, administrators, and a real, as others have said, a real special thank you to teachers. I know from firsthand experience that teaching in a remote setting or in a hybrid setting takes more work. And, so you already were putting in, well beyond the normal 8-hour day. Now you're putting in more than that. I want to acknowledge that. I still want us to keep working at ways to see where we can find time to help you. But we need to recognize that work. So again, extreme thank you. And frankly, welcome to my classroom. After 2 weeks of in-person instruction at NC State, we had to shut down. As Mr. Haggerty noted, even when plans are good plans are laid out, this infection takes off. And so after 2 weeks of, it was really kind of an in-person and hybrid. I had to do both in-person and work with people remotely. Back, here's my classroom now. I had to go put a whiteboard behind me to teach. So it's a challenge. And I think this points toward the work that we need to do as the school system is we don't want to get caught in a situation where we open and then have to shut back down. So I really do appreciate staff and the community trying to work together to try to make sure that decision is made carefully and thoughtfully. In that regard, I really did appreciate the webinar from the Science Advisory Board, and I know we're going to hear more about that from Superintendent Moore. But the information that they provided probably cannot be repeated too often. So I'll just note a couple of the takeaways that I found extremely important, and to me is they're noting that schools are not more or less risk sites than any other organization, but in fact, transmission among children and transmission among the regular population is pretty much the same. And so what we really need to do is look at community prevalence to make any decisions. I appreciated that they reinforced that we really need to pay particular attention to that community prevalence in what they referred to as congregate settings. So settings where people congregate together. That's exactly what happens in a school. And they indicated to us that congregate settings should not open up until the community prevalence is low. With further questioning, then they provided a little bit more detail as to what they considered low of community prevalence. And that was 5% positive testing of symptomatic individuals and 1% positive testing of asymptomatic individuals. Sadly, here in Wake County, we're some above 8%. We had a real big spike today when you look at that data. So the point here to reinforce is that for us to be able to open our schools, which we want to do, as others have stated, we need all of us, staff, teachers, administrators, but all of us in the entire community to work together to get this virus under control. Because until that happens, we can't open schools. So community, wear those face masks, please, not just over the mouth. They've got to be over the nose and mouth. It works. The face mask works as well as a vaccine does. If we work at this together, we can get this under control. And if we get it under control, we can open our classrooms and we don't have to be behind shielding, be behind masks when we need to be interacting with our students. Finally, I'd like to also offer thanks to Trenton Brown and the equity team at Sanderson High School. Dr. McFarland mentioned this in his comments. I was pleased to have been invited to attend their meeting talking with students as to what their education should look like during this virtual instruction time. And again, just to reinforce the student voice, they were very clear that they wanted rigor in all of their classes, and they were careful to articulate that they were looking for rigor and not just lots of busy work. They wanted, how do we go in depth to get that deeper learning, not just more time, not just more projects, but digging more in depth. They really emphasized the importance of relationships, as we've heard over and over again. And they finally emphasized the importance of understanding and respecting context, both the context of what we're teaching and learning, but also the context in which the learner is learning, and frankly, the teacher is teaching, because we're all working in strange situations, and understanding that context will help us be both better learners and teachers. So shout out to the students, you did a great job, and thanks for the equity team for hosting and inviting me to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton, and good evening to everyone. I will echo my colleagues' thanks to all of our staff members, our educators, our central office staff. They are doing amazing work. And I think we also need to acknowledge, as Ms. Mahaffey in particular and others have said, this is hard work, and we're grieving the loss of our normal back to school activities, of our athletics, of our getting together at school and seeing each other again, so in person. So I think we need to acknowledge that grief and sadness, but also then try to find that resilience to adjust to this new start of school year. And I am hopeful that we will be gathered together in our schools. And as Dr. Martin said, this community needs to make sure that we reduce the risks of COVID to our children and our educators. And I hope that we are going to everyone focus on our students, our teachers, our parents. Our students are watching us. They are seeing how we react under this crisis and under these stresses. And I hope that we can show them that we will persevere and that we will be resilient through this. And I hope, and I want to particularly thank Dr. Steiger for emphasizing the self-care for her staff. I think that's important for us to do to each other, to our students, to our parents, and our families. So thank you for raising that up, Dr. Steiger, because I think that's going to be incredibly important as we enter this new school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kushner, and thank all of you board members, my colleagues, for your heartfelt comments, thoughts, and appreciations. As I close our comments, I just again say to our parents and community, we hear you. If the emails that come in that say open schools now is an indication, it's just the beginning of the third week. We know that this is hard. We know that this is difficult, but we're here with you. And again, we are working to open schools as soon as we can safely do so. So hang in there and extend to all of us, to everyone, the abundant grace and patience that Superintendent Moore has talked about ever since this pandemic has begun. So with that, I will close the comments and move to our meeting agenda. We don't have any changes. So if I can ask for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Chair Sutton, this is Christine Kushner. I move approval of tonight's agenda as listed.
I
Jim
second
Martin, do I have a
Monique
second?
Johnson.
All right. Got a motion from Mrs. Kushner and a second from Ms. Johnson-Hostler to approve tonight's meeting agenda. I call for the roll call vote if there's, unless there's any discussion. Hearing none. Ms. Kushner,
Aye.
Dr. Martin,
Aye.
Mrs. Scott,
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty,
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler,
Aye.
Mr. Fletcher.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So that is a vote of 8-0 with approval of our meeting agenda. Again, noting that Mrs. Vice Chair Cash is not with us. So moving to public comment. And as I think it was Ms. Scott noted that we have a number of public comment speakers tonight. The following citizens have submitted comments as part of our public comment portion of this evening's agenda. The comments are linked on the same online agenda we are using for tonight's meeting. That agenda, as well as guidelines for those wishing to submit comments for future virtual meetings, can be found at the school district's website, which is wcpss.net, under the tab labeled School Board. We have comments from 97 members of the public. That gives you any sense of how much our community wishes to be heard on this evening. The topics and speakers whose comments are attached to this agenda are as follows. I won't read all 97 names as I typically do, but I will give you the number of speakers under each topic, again, to give you a sense of where those comments are coming from. But there are 42 members of the public that want to comment on, or that have commented on, the reopening of schools. Again, 42 speakers on the reopening of schools. There are 25 speakers on the topic of SROs in our schools. There are 4 speakers on the BLM curriculum, and that is a Black Lives Matter curriculum, 4 speakers on that topic. There are 12 speakers on the topic of virtual learning, and then there are 12 speakers on a range of topics from ACT and SAT testing centers, 2 on MVP, 1 on health resources in schools, 1 on teacher-student collaboration, 1 on the mask policy, 1 on leadership, 1 in response to comment on 818, 1 on Plan B implementation, 1 on sound education for at-risk students, 1 on addressing the needs of the most vulnerable, and 1 on the rights of students and parents. Again, all those totaling 97 public comment members of the public bringing comment tonight. So again, board members, please see those comments in the agenda. They are attached to tonight's agenda, and the public can see those as well on the meeting materials listed in our board materials as well. So with that, I'll move to our information item. That information item includes a reopening update or updates from our Superintendent Moore. We will go back to finishing the work session agenda. So Superintendent Moore, I'll turn it over to you, and then again, let you drive and turn it over to the staff that will be providing that update, and then go back to your comments as well.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. So the updates that I was providing today really are broken into two parts. The first part will just be a sort of a highlights of the presentation that you heard in work session. And then the second part will be a little bit of information about where we are right now with the COVID Scientific Advisory Board partnership with the folks at Duke. So I can do the entire information item, and then we can take questions about either topic, or I can split it and we can take any questions or comments specifically after my recap of the work session, and then do the COVID Scientific Advisory Board. We'll see how it flows in the presentation.
Sure.
So first, just a couple of highlights from the work session presentation earlier today. You received information about virtual and drive-through meet and greets from schools, materials distribution, open houses, meet the teacher events, lots of things that were going on during those first 2 weeks. And you got to hear a little bit from actually a couple of principals who implemented and led their school communities through those orientation weeks as we were preparing for, core instruction everywhere beginning this week. That 2-week focus on building relationships was really important to us as we started the school year, knowing how important it is for teachers and students to develop relationships. We know that there was some core instruction already going on during those first 2 weeks, but we really wanted the focus to be about getting to know each other, understanding how to navigate the virtual environment, being able to answer questions, giving time for device distribution, all of those kinds of things that quite frankly normally take place during the first couple of weeks of the school year anyway. We did provide also a report that at this time, greater than 98.5% of the students that we expected to be enrolled are actually enrolled. And we are engaged in a number of activities at the school level using our teachers, our guidance counselors, our social workers to help us locate students who have not yet presented themselves during virtual instruction or that we haven't been in contact with. We're also enrolling new students and withdrawing students. All of that is happening all at the same time. We continue to pay attention to our numbers and hope that that we, as always, though, those do continue to grow through the first 20 to 40 days of school for us. The technology and hotspot distribution, you got an update on that as well today. In addition to the hotspots and devices that were distributed last spring, we received requests for over 50,000 again. 37,000 have already been distributed. All 50,000 invitations have been sent out with a date to pick up if they've not already done so, and the hotspots as well. That will continue to probably be an iterative work. We'll have devices that break. We'll have families that move in. We'll have families that try to make it work with the 1 or 2 they had in the home, and they realize they might need another one. So we'll continue to provide support and resources for our families as needed in that arena. You also received an update around how our teachers continue to remain engaged in professional learning. And I put at their pace in this because we gave them a pretty long runway to complete the 4 modules that support instruction in a remote environment. We know that it's important. Some of our teachers got an early start and they were on it. Some needed more time. We just know that right now there are so many changes going on that providing flexibility in as many arenas as we can is really important. You received an update on the Families and Students Together FAST program, the partnerships that we have with our community groups that are helping us with ensuring that we have some spaces that are affordable for families to take children if they're required to work but need a place where students can be supervised and supported in their remote learning activities. So we're really proud of that work with our community partners and really do value their engagement in this process. I will mention one other thing that's not on the slide. You received a bit of an update also about the food distribution programs and just late breaking news from just yesterday or today, this morning. It was early yet. It was yesterday. The USDA did extend the waivers that allow us to do the congregate feeding that we've been doing since we closed last spring and in the summer. And really what that means is that the requirement that we were getting ready to put in place that student ID numbers would need to be used and that students would either need to pay or use their free or reduced status to access meals, is no longer in place. As we have been doing all summer, any student can access the meals. There's not a requirement for any kind of particular status, and there's no ID that's required to pick up those meals. That is very helpful with regards to ensuring that we continue to provide that support to our community. We do still have a little bit of a barrier with regards to the fact that when we are not in the building, we're not generating revenue, and it is that revenue that actually pays for our child and nutrition workers, which is why you've seen the reassignment opportunity that they have to support our staff, students in schools during remote learning in order to continue employment during this time. But we will continue to also need to use our CNS workers for our food distribution program. So they've got a couple of options there. And then I think I would close to say that the tenor and the message from the reopening presentation is that we know, and I think it was Drew Cook who presented a few weeks ago, where on a slide he mentioned this idea of balancing consistency and responsiveness. We know that structures are important to schools and students and teachers in order to ensure that high levels of learning and teaching are happening, but we also know that we need to be flexible and responsive to the demands and the feedback that we get. And we know, and I think it was Dr. Martin who mentioned that we've got feedback that's all over the place in terms of how wonderful some things are and how not wonderful they might be in other arenas. So we need to really tap into our teachers and our families to understand what that feedback looks like and make sure that what's being implemented in school levels is providing both what's needed for students and what's needed for teachers and staff, so that everybody is engaged in high levels of teaching and learning, but that it is actually a doable assignment for both the students and the staff. We've said before that in-face learning is still best. We know that, but we're going to do the best job that we can with the circumstances that we are in, and the feedback is important. So we will continue to, I think Mr. Haggerty brought this up as well, look at that feedback to see what flexibilities we need to exercise, or if there's messaging that needs to shift, by really understanding what's happening in schools as we move now into this third week where we are moving out of the orientation phase and into full instruction. So that will continue to be our work moving forward. So at this time, we can either stop and pause for some questions around these areas that were covered, and then cover the COVID Scientific Advisory Board.
Yeah, we'll take any questions if there are any. I do just want to note again that we, since March, we had provided over 2.5 million meals at no cost to our community. And as of Friday, during our press briefing, we had announced that we would start having to charge our normal and reduced lunch prices for those, and that has changed due to the recent ruling by the USDA. So we are pleased and appreciative of that ruling from the USDA, and just want to again reiterate the fact that we had announced as late as Friday that charges would begin, but we're pleased to now announce and in an excited way having the backpedal on that to say that we will continue to provide those meals at no cost. Dr. Martin, I see your hand, and Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you. And I've got a couple questions here. One, in the work session, you noted that we had identified greater than 98.5% of our projected enrollment. As I calculate that, that's about 159,500 students. The Google Classroom number you gave us was 162,000, roughly 500 students. So there's about a 3,000 student differential between Google Classroom and that projected. Do we have an idea of what that difference would be? It struck me that the Google Classroom could have been an ADM, but just looking at our ADM numbers.
Hi, Dr. Martin. No. The Google login is individual users, so it would also include teachers that are logging in as well. Yes, but you are right. That's about 159,600 and some students that are accounted for at this time.
Okay. Thank you. On the hotspots that have been distributed, I heard one question, so I don't know how prevalent it is, asking about the data limits on the hotspots. I mean, just for information's sake, we want to make sure that, I mean, I could understand that they may not be unlimited data, but we want to make sure that the data has the capacity that it needs to for what we're expecting students to do. So can we get any clarification on the data limits on the hotspots being distributed?
Yes, Dr. Martin, I can jump in there. They are actually all unlimited.
Okay.
Certainly, if there is something going on where we have a lot of data in the area on a Verizon or an AT&T network, and say hurricanes or things like that, the data can be throttled back just a little bit, just due to the amount of folks that are trying to access. But no, we did purchase unlimited plans for that.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify to make sure, because I mean, not every concern that's raised is necessarily substantial, but thank you. And I think the unlimited makes good sense. I appreciate the discussion that we heard, and I think it might even be more appropriate for a student achievement committee meeting. But I will look forward to the discussion about the evaluation of how is the remote day different from a regular day, because we are hearing from both teachers and families that we can't just log in at whatever time it is in the morning and and act as though it was a normal school day. And in fact, even at the high school level, we often say that we'd love to shift the school day to start at 8:30 instead of 7:30. We can't do that terribly effectively because of transportation. But while everything's remote, we would have that opportunity. So it just strikes me that there are some things that we could do to do a little bit of re-envisioning, which now, we've often said we don't want to go back to normal. We want to create a new normal. So I look forward to that discussion, and just want to reinforce that I look forward to hearing that happen. As we look at what's happening during this time, I also would like to just, throw out that I hope we can pay a little bit of attention to where there's been learning loss, but where there's been learning gains. A lot of the narrative has been worried about the learning loss that will take place when children are not in the physical classroom. But, as an educator, I see there's also benefits of the independence that people have to learn to try to make things work. And frankly, spending more time, maybe it's cooking dinner, maybe it's, working in the yard, recess in the backyard, maybe more often than in the classroom. I guess my point is we have an opportunity to look at a very different learning environment, and let's not lose that, because I'm not convinced that we're going to only be seeing learning loss. I think we're going to be seeing some learning gains. So those are just a couple of ideas that I'd like to pitch our thinking about, probably for a student achievement kind of work. But the question that I have is, are we keeping track of or assessing the extra time that staff are needing to put into, the extra virtual work? Like I say, I know from personal experience that, the in-person has a lot of efficiency. I can work with a group of students at one time instead of sort of the one-on-one. The preparing materials, all new materials, takes extra time. Trying to engage with students who aren't engaging takes more time. So I guess my question is, are we keeping track of that? Obviously, I would love to be able to pay everybody for the work that's done, though as educators, we know we do a lot of work for no pay. But I think it is important as we think about budgets, but even in preparation for, legislative discussions down the road, because there's sometimes a mentality that the virtual world is less work, or that we can, with virtual instruction, teach more students with fewer staff. And I think the reality is it goes the other way around. So are we keeping that data for our own information and for, future work? And if not, can we figure out a way to maybe keep track of that so we know the extra work that our teachers and administrators are putting in to make this happen?
So I'll respond to that, Dr. Martin. It's a great point, and we do know that being in this kind of environment requires a lot of different planning. It requires different pedagogical tools. And so, we do want to be able to support our staff. Part of what we have been working on, with meeting with our staff here, and then we'll be having some conversations with principals on Thursday, is we want to get to the heart of what the questions are pretty quickly, and how much time, folks are having to spend outside of the school day, versus, how this school day might be structured. And one of the good things is that a lot of our teachers, well over half of our teachers are in schools working daily. And so there's a real lifeline there for principals to get information from teachers. And so I think it's something that we can tackle pretty quickly, but it is a high priority on our list right now.
Thank you. I think it's important to have that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. And also just wanted to follow up on some remote learning related issues, specifically since Ms. Cash is not here with us. I wanted to ask about cyberbullying. And Dr. McFarland, I heard you earlier talk about having that students have a clear identity online. And can you talk a bit about how we are addressing and preventing those cyberbullying, how we're protecting privacy in some of our remote learning that's online, and some of those on-screen disruptions, just how we're handling the protocols around remote learning for our students?
So I think there are several of us that could respond in different areas to that, Ms. Kushner. Obviously, to begin with, we have protocols, systems, and structures in place to protect student privacy and data, and that's sort of the technical piece of it. There's also, from a teaching perspective, it's really important to establish those rules and those norms and expectations around how we learn and cooperate and work together, collaborate within a class. And there's also things that, staff can do when, if you see someone trying to come into your Google Meet, if you don't recognize them, then you don't let them in, or you can quickly mute or disconnect an intruder. That's really important. And then also having conversations with students about how we treat each other online. I mean, words still hurt, whether you hear them or whether you read them. And it's really important for us to understand that sometimes I think we think online communication is not as hurtful, when in many ways it's oftentimes more vicious. But I know Marlo can probably speak to some of the work that's been done by her group around this topic as well. Marlo?
Sure. So Ms. Kushner, I appreciate the question. It's an area that we will continue to grow in our support for. Kids, are kids. As you guys know, I have my own teenager, and we don't always make the best choices when we're children. And so, our kids are figuring out ways to get around systems. We're blocking them as quickly as possible. One of the things that we have done is we've sent out a securities best practices for Google Meet for our teachers. We've also purchased just this week, we've just purchased Google Enterprise, or we're in the process of purchasing Google Enterprise, which will give us some more security features in Google Meet, which will allow our teachers to have a little bit more control. As Dr. McFarland mentioned, there are certainly ways that we have asked teachers and our staff to set up their Google Meets that are more secure. But I would also say that we've got some work to do in a lot of areas, because this is unknown for a lot of our teachers, unknown for a lot of adults, and understanding where the areas of need are, and as we continue to work through that. So I will say from our department, you'll probably be seeing a lot more on training around cybersecurity. We also, just as a quick note, I think Dr. McFarland mentioned this, as long as students are logged into our resources, their names do show up. So every time they do something in a meeting, we know exactly who has done it. In most cases, not all, we're working through closing some of the loopholes. But then we will continue to work through every bit of problems. Unfortunately, everybody across the country is kind of working through these problems together. And so we're all finding ways to help support our families and our students and our teachers as we go through this process.
And Ms.
It's
Fisher,
important work because, beyond when we gather together in person, again, still this virtual world's going to be with us. And so we need our students and teachers to, these are invaluable skills, but it's also very real to so many, as you just pointed out, Ms. Gaddis, to so many families right now trying to struggle with this new environment. I'm sorry, Dr. McFarland, you were going to add.
sure, I'll just add the last piece. Paul Coe and his team with Student Due Process are also working with principals so that we can provide really clear and specific guidelines about, how to handle students and cyberbullying and what constitutes the cyberbullying. It goes right back to our student code of student conduct. That applies, in brick and mortar. It also applies in the world of virtual. And so we have to make sure that we're clear, we're consistent, and that we also deal fairly and consistently with breaches of that trust that we expect from our kids and how we treat each other.
Thank you. And I did want to, again, extend thanks for the device distribution. That device is now the textbook, essentially. And a lot of community members are asking me about, the extension, the extensive distribution that we're doing of devices. And I said, well, this is the textbook. Not only it predates COVID that we were being pushed by the legislature to go to digital resources. So this is an acceleration of that reality, but we need to be thoughtful. And I know we've been very cautious and thoughtful about how we're handling all this. So I thank you for that work that's been done to get our students these resources. I wish that, we had more resources before this started, because I think that since that was the expectation from the state that we do digital, we need to keep going, but I'll pause my critique from there, but just thank Ms. Gaddis, her staff, and all the academic staff for bringing together these remote resources. Thank you, Chair Sutton. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tushner. Appreciate that. Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. And I want to use this opportunity to get back to something I mentioned during my comments, which is during this update about reopening, I think we have a wonderful opportunity here to talk about some of the progress. We've talked about what we've done in the orientation and what we're doing going forward, but this would be a good time to talk about the progress we are making toward face-to-face instruction, because I know a lot of work has been going on in the district, but we don't always share that information and talk about it. And so whether it's appropriate for the superintendent or staff now or at a future meeting, as part of these updates, I'd like us to hear and discuss more about some of the preparatory work that has been done and that's continuing to go on, that's taking time, like the recently appropriated funds for PPE procurement and what's going on with that we were just awarded from the county commission out of the CARES money, the process for hiring the health safety assistants and the process for screening. I know the district has been carrying on a number of like walkthroughs and test runs, for example, about how student arrival would work, redesign and modification of the classrooms. There's been a lot of this work that's been going on too. And I know, a lot of what we're talking about are things that have gone on just now, but I think it would be very reassuring and comforting for everybody to know about all of this additional work that's going on as part of these updates. Whether you can address it now, I know it might not be part of your presentation, or just if you will take these comments as feedback for the future, it's something that I think a lot of us would like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hegarty. Point well taken and duly noted. Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you. I think I heard the answer that it's going to be Paul Coe that is going to work with principals around the cyberbullying. And so I'll just echo, actually, I thought Mr. Haggerty was going to say this and go before me. And I'm sure this is on Dr. Coe's mind, but just my reflection of while we're addressing cyberbullying, I also would like to see perhaps maybe policy committee or someone go back to looking at using an official format to have students report it, especially while they're virtual. Some of this is happening in the middle of class. And so we want to make sure that we have ways to help families track this specifically, because it is going to be new for several families. Again, we've seen bullying in the buildings, and now it's just going to probably exacerbate itself a little bit. But I also want to remind us that students are also under a lot of pressure, don't have the necessary tools to deal with stress. And so just a reminder too, that as we think about this is, if student support services can be a reminder to teachers to share with parents in their communications, referral options for students who are dealing with a lot of stress and trauma that may be acting out as a result of it, I think for me is a proactive way to engage. And then just the last tidbit on, hopefully we're also providing some tools and resources for our educators for signs of suicide prevention during this time as well. Just remembering our students are certainly grieving and experiencing a lot. And so we see some of that manifesting in unseemly
messages that are
behavior.
coming through. So you ask me that way if you can.
That was not me, but I'd like to just add those things. Not that student support services needed any extra work, but this conversation just reminded me that it may be a good time when educators or student support services are sending emails or reminders to family to remind them of the resources we also have in the community that are available for our young people.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Just those are great suggestions, and know that in our work, we are working from a place of making sure that we are engaging and supporting our students and making sure the core behavioral health tenets are placed first. And then when there are other interventions that are needed, we're trying to say minimize the exclusionary practices in this environment, engage with students as much as possible. And also for, I think the suggestion around making sure that families and students know how to communicate acts of bullying is something that we will definitely take to account and develop.
Thank you very much. And I certainly appreciate hearing that your focus is certainly more on providing services for students versus our general punitive measures, especially given that these are new times and we have to be creative in intervention as well as prevention. Thank you as always.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Mrs. Scott.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the update. I just had a really quick question. I know this has been discussed, but I just wanted to make sure I brought this up again. A lot of the feedback that we're receiving talks about there seems to be so much screen time for younger students, and that we feel that there are teachers that are trying to match a certain number of instructional hours, and that being screen time. Do you have suggestions when families do feel overwhelmed, when it's very difficult? What would you recommend for them to do, particularly our younger grades who are a bit overwhelmed with the amount of work that's coming at them? I know that this is a fluid situation that we're in terms of we'll continue to adapt and change to better serve our families, but I just wondered where we were at with that.
Well, I firmly believe that if parents are having any questions or concerns about screen time or any issues with learning in their home, to immediately go to their teacher and or their school principal. That's the first step. But I also think what we're trying to provide too is alternatives, in that There are asynchronous activities for students to log into. And as a parent, if you have to make a decision that today I need for my child to work asynchronously, that's a decision that the parent has to make. And we will continue to work then on our end to try to make adjustments. I think what we have to think about, like at the elementary level, while it may be that there is a 30-minute block of maybe ELA and then a 30-minute block of math, that doesn't seem like much from a specific subject. But then when you start to put it together with also there was a block of an elective and then there was a block of maybe health or PE or something like that, then suddenly you have students that are spending more time online and in front of a screen. And then of course we know that much of their homework is asynchronous, but it's also sitting in front of a screen. So those are things that we want to begin to look at and see where we can make some adjustments and be supportive of families and teachers, because I think this would speak to both.
I appreciate that, because every parent I've heard from recognizes how hard their teachers are working and how appreciative they are of the teachers. So I do appreciate that. And then I was curious what sort of guidelines are in place for teachers of all grade levels when it comes to different programs that are approved or not approved. We do hear quite often from advocates concerned about screen time, but also concerned about addiction and pornography. And YouTube, if someone's using their own personal device, YouTube can be a really slippery slope in terms of videos or things that children are exposed to. So I was wondering what types of guidelines are in place for teachers in terms of what websites or different things they should access to share with their students.
I'm not sure, Marlo, if you want to take this. Much of it is with the training that we have embedded in some of the learning in the modules to begin the school year. The 4 modules that we're asking all teachers to complete, by the end of October. But I also think that, we have processes and procedures in place as a district to screen and review any recommendation that we put into homework or into assignments or that we post for students to view. We have an obligation to review it to make sure that it's appropriate, and that is on us. And then there are also the programs, as Marlo spoke to earlier, about trying to just remind students about safety and security. And I know that her area has done a lot of work in the community on how to support your students at home and what signs of abuse, online may be, or what to look for with your students. And even now it's really, I think, pertinent that we really examine that as we're spending more and more time connected, and that students have time to visit lots of places and do lots of things, because we also know parents are working as well and cannot sit there 24/7 with the student, so particularly at the younger age. Marlo, is there anything to add?
Sure, I can jump in just a little bit as well. We've had a resource in the district called the Digital Resource Product Library. It's actually powered by Learn Platform, which is a local company that works with us to vet all of our resources. That helps us do a couple of things. One, it helps us make sure we have data privacy in place for our students, that we're not giving away our student data, so that we have agreements put in play for all of our students. It also gets vetted by curriculum and or whoever else needs to be vetting it, whether it is CTE, whether it's a financial app and finance needs to look at it. We can have them vet it before it gets approved. That library right now is a little overwhelming. So Dr. McFarland and I have talked with his staff in mind about starting to narrow that greatly. It has been difficult during this time, especially because so much was offered free during COVID in the spring. And so teachers rightfully were trying to find anything that would help them work with their students. But we did hear parents loud and clear at the end of the spring, where they said they needed to for sure not have as many apps. And so we will continue to work to whittle those down as we go through the process. We do filter all of our district laptops and our district hotspots. So as long as they are using our resources, I know that hasn't made a lot of people happy this week, just because it required them to log in, especially today. But directions for that are on the Tech Guide site. So if someone needs additional help with that, they can get that there. But we are required to do that for them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that's an ongoing concern for parents, is just how to monitor and manage and keep track of what their children are doing online or on devices. And it can definitely be overwhelming. So I appreciate I appreciate all of that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just as a reminder, we do have an online safety section of the Tech Guide site. As a parent myself, I go through the same things all the other parents are doing. So I'm constantly looking, as are a lot of our staff, to make things for kids. So we will continue to push on in that area.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Those were all the questions I had, Chair Sutton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. All right, Superintendent Moore, we can move on now to the second part of your presentation, the COVID Scientific Advisory Board update.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, WCPSS is partnering, has a memorandum of agreement with Duke University and a couple of their folks to establish a COVID Scientific Advisory Board. The COVID Scientific Advisory Board is comprised of, right now, about 7 folks that work in various capacities with Duke, research, health, and they bring in other folks as needed. And the advisory board really is sort of a proposed solution to support local school districts with the decision-making processes and the learning that needs to be in place and understanding in order to be prepared to reopen schools. I like to think of this as really a collaboration that allows us as a district to provide education and resources that supports opening our schools as soon as possible in a manner where our teachers and our families have both the understanding and the confidence that we will open schools, knowing full well what the precautions are that we need to take, how to engage in the structures that keep our students and staff safe. There's no magic bullet, obviously, at this point, but we want to make sure that our confidence and our understanding when we go back to schools is high. And so that is a big goal of this partnership for us. In that solution, the COVID Scientific Advisory Board, just to remind you of the things they have said in their presentations about their goals, they want to initiate direct to family and community-centered approach to provide scientific, data-driven guidance. They want to also provide us data-driven feedback about the potential consequences of actions and approaches under considerations for student return. So what are the things we're considering? What does the data tell us we should do? What does the research imply? And that's another part that's really important, because COVID being brand new this year, the research is ever evolving and changing. And so it's important that we are connected with folks who are up to date on what that says. So these are 2 big drivers in Duke's own words of the support that they are providing. So moving on then next to what we've done so far. So one of the big tenets of their work is their educational outreach activities. And these are the activities that have already begun as explained in the MOA. So this is a series of instructional webinars that the Duke Advisory Board, the pediatricians and the doctors and the researchers, are putting on to, and they invite school staff, school district staff members from schools, certified, non-certified, some central services staff, administrators. They invite them. It's conducted by the Duke Scientific Advisory Board. We've held 2 thus far. The first one was a little over a week ago on August 24th. And the very first topic for that webinar was COVID-19 in the classroom, masks. So the entire webinar was focused on what the research says about masks, what works, what doesn't work, best practices, types of masks, all of that. The registration, the pre-registration for the event was at 1284. The number that were actually in attendance was at 666. 58% of those attendees were from WCPSS. We would expect that number to be high of the 4 districts because we are the largest. During the session, it's about an hour-long session. A portion of that is presentation, and during the entire session, they have a box available for Q&A, and people are able to ask specific questions about what's coming on the presentation, whether it's additional feedback or questions, just things that come up as the webinar is going on. And they do work really hard to answer as many of those questions and stay within the 1-hour time frame. And at whatever they're not able to answer, and at the end, they will create an FAQ. They also do post-meeting surveys to try to get ideas of how good the folks who were in attendance felt the information was, and to also get suggestions for future topics. The second webinar was held just last night, and it was COVID-19 in the classroom, air and surfaces. And this webinar, I don't have the data on the number of attendees or any of that sort of thing yet, but this webinar focused on the kinds of information that's being put out there about things like ventilation, air filtration systems, fans in the classroom, opening windows and doors, and just really covering both the pros and cons of the higher filtration within a filter that you get, the less airflow you have in a classroom. So there's a push-pull there. Opening windows or fans could spread virus as opposed to mitigating virus, depending on how the airflow is happening and whether or not there's anybody that is contagious in the classroom and where the droplets are. So what really came out at the end of the webinar for that one was the stressing of the masks, the social distancing, the 3 W's that we keep hearing about, and the things that we know we can do and control. I think it was also clear that in this particular case, the steps that we had our own folks from facilities and maintenance and operation that were listening to the webinar as well, so that they can hear what's coming on out there also, to make sure that our plans are aligned with what we're hearing and learning from the webinar. And as of right now, we are aligned. The feedback for the first webinar was very positive. And even in the comments, there were comments from teachers that, in some of them, they said, I already knew a lot of what you were telling us, but it was important to hear it, to understand it better, and to be able to explain it to others, as well as to clarify some misconceptions that I had. So that kind of feedback, I think, is really important, and is the kind of feedback that is important so that we can know that teachers and staff members are growing in their understanding and therefore confidence to enter back into a building for face-to-face teaching. So we will hopefully have that scientific advisory board. They're looking at weekly educational webinars for the teachers, administrators, and school staff. Not sure if it'll be every week or every other week. We've had 2 weeks in a row, so we're looking at what the topics are. There are both some topics that we know need to be done as a part of the educational series, and then there are other things where they want to be flexible based on the types of feedback that they get from the folks that are listening. There are a couple of things that we're also following up on. Given the number of teachers across these 4 districts, and it is Durham, Chapel Hill, Orange, and Wake County Public School System that are part of this group that's been working together. We want to take a look at whether or not what's the impediment to teachers perhaps participating. You'll remember that I said 1,200 signed up, but less than 700 attended. So was there a conflict? Is it the date or the time of night or the day that's chosen? How do we make that better? We've talked about whether or not these webinars should be required for staff. We're not quite there yet. We're already requiring some things of them with regards to remote learning. We do know that the Duke folks are looking at standing up a website that will contain the archived webinars, and it'll contain the FAQs. And once that website is up and running, then folks who were not able to participate in the webinar can go back and take a look at it. Principals may use to choose pieces of it to share with their staff in meetings. We believe there will be other ways to get it out besides the actual webinar itself. And I think that'll be important to track and see how often that is happening. But they're working on that right now. The website is not up yet. I think they're choosing a name and doing all of that work that has to be done to stand that up. Some of the things that are coming up next, they are reviewing the structures for the screening protocols that are being required by the North Carolina DHHS guidance, the questions that need to be asked of staff and students and the temperature, those kinds of things, so that they can understand how that can best be implemented in a school, and the extent to which the screening protocols provide the same types of information that they are looking for as a part of their research. So that'll be work that's moving forward. And then finally, they are looking to engage to review data, both that the state and local health officials are already collecting and have from the folks in our schools and our students, and that that's already being tracked by state and local health officials, and then determine next steps with whatever data agreement they will have with the school systems. So that is, Duke is still contemplating the types of data beyond the regular screening data that's already required in schools. We don't know, they're going to make a proposal around a data agreement. We will bring that to the board for review, and then we'll see where that takes us. Right now, for us, the big plus that we are getting from this really is the educational webinars and the opportunity to build the capacity of our school system staff, their understanding and their confidence. And then I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the COVID Scientific Advisory Board.
Thank you for that update, Superintendent Moore. One question I want to ask, to be fair, and we know that there are a number of parents and concerned citizens, we see it in the emails, that again are asking us to return to school now. Going back to the slide, the goals and the proposed solution, one of them is to provide schools with data-driven feedback about potential consequences of actions and approaches under consideration for students' return. I guess my question is, will the Scientific Advisory Board provide us with, or can you ask them if they would also provide them with the potential consequences of inaction, I guess some would call it, because I do feel that there are, and I think we've talked about, there are risks, there are health risks, and I think Ms. Kushner touched on it a meeting or two before. There are health risks, safety risks that students, or that we run into with students returning to school. There are social emotional risks, behavioral risks, and others, developmental risks, by not returning to school. And so if we are fair, I guess, and sort of have a balanced approach to the argument, the conversation, to our decision, I think it's important for us to have any sort of data-driven feedback that's available, so that we as a board are able to weigh, and a district are able to weigh and balance those risks in our decision making. Does that making sense?
Yeah, Chair Sutton. So the advisory board will cover both of those, both what it means to safely reopen and the consequences and the pros and cons of not opening. They've already alluded to it in their very first webinar when they talked about the research that's out there about the importance of face-to-face and in-person learning on so many levels for students. That's bigger even than just the academic gains, although obviously associated with the academic gains. And we all agree that in-person learning is best, and it is what we want to return to as soon as possible. So I think that I'll take the specific feedback that you're asking about to them as well, to make sure that as we move forward, but I do believe they'll cover both sides of that coin.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and in all fairness to both sides of the argument, and all of those that are in the public, that we are getting information from both sides of the argument, so to speak.
Agreed.
Mrs. Scott.
Sorry for that delay in unmuting. I really appreciate this information, and Chair Sutton, you kind of took the words out of my my mouth here with making sure that we've got, information for families that does look at this as a larger picture. And the update, does say to engage and review data that state and local health officials are tracking and determine next steps with data agreement. That's what I think the frustration for families, and I know you recognize this, Superintendent Moore, is that everyone's looking for that magic number, what's the number, when do we get to go back? What is it that we're looking for? And I know that this is moving forward in that work. And I appreciate the opportunity that teachers will have the opportunity, and people who work in the schools will have the opportunity to listen to doctors, to ask questions, to help build their confidence. And I do look forward to this website. I hope that it does have something that's targeted towards our parents and our families that will help address some of the questions that they have.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott, for that comment. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton and Ms. Moore. I think, and Ms. Scott alluded to it, that a lot of our community members are looking for what metrics we're going to be using. So I think this advisory board is going to be useful in having us develop any sort of metrics, benchmarks that we want to balance the developmental risks to our children of staying out of school, as well as to balance that with the health risks of COVID-19. So thank you for involving this work. And I was also wondering, I think we need to underscore, I saw comments from Ms. Kelly Creech as she was giving guidance to school staff, that when they're doing the screenings, as an example, not to record them, because we don't want to keep then it becomes a medical record and we're not creating medical records. So I think it's really important for us to underscore that and to emphasize that this board, that the data doesn't mean we're going to be collecting individual student data. So can you just confirm that? That's my understanding. Can you confirm whether that's accurate?
Right now we're not collecting any information. We don't have any mechanism to do that. And for the purposes of this agreement, it's only indicated in the memorandum of agreement that we will look at establishing a data agreement. So that work is still before us.
And I know that, our staff is heavily trained in FERPA and student privacy.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to make sure that is the culture of White County schools. And so that's going to go forward no matter
right.
how we return to school. And I think it's important for us to state that.
Right. Clearly attorneys will be involved in anything that comes forward, and the board will have an opportunity to review, and it'll be, discussed and before we move forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kushner, for that question and raising that issue. Dr. Martin.
Excuse me. Thank you. Based on this last little discussion, I just want us to rethink, refocus just a little bit. And I completely agree. There's a lot of question about what are the metrics. And as a scientist, I deal with data and metrics all the time. It was very interesting to listen to the webinar. I think there were two pieces of information that we got about metrics. One was that it's unwise to open congregate settings if the community prevalence is not low. It's below the 5 or 1%, depending on which you're measuring. But the other thing that was that the data is pretty clear that in an appropriately controlled setting, with masks, with distancing, you really can control the spread. That means it's very possible to do the kinds of things that we would like to do if there is community agreement to codes of conduct. And so part of our challenge, we can't just have metrics that say after we cross some threshold, we can go back to normal and everything's okay. Our metrics need to include an attitudinal metric that has an agreement that every member of our community who comes back to school will respect the teacher, will respect the other students, will respect each other, And we've got to have a very clear, code of agreement. That's part of the metric that we need. And, I think part of the challenge that many teachers feel, and I know I feel it, is, well, the vast majority of students, respect and create a good culture of respect. There's not a day that goes by in a normal school setting where somebody is not sort of flouting the rules. The challenge here is flouting the rules, flouting the expectations can actually create significant health risk, even including death. And so as we think about the metrics, again, it just comes back to the community. Community, we have to work together to get this under control. We can do that, but we have to have that mutual respect. And that mutual respect really can't have lots of exceptions that say kids will be kids and act up or disregard engagement. So yes, it's physical metrics, but it's also developing that culture that says, hey, we're going to actually take care of each other, because if we did that, we could be open today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. All right, seeing no further questions on this topic, Superintendent Moore, anything else, closing comments around this?
Well, I just continue to be excited about the opportunity to learn and grow and to provide this opportunity for our teachers and staff. And I will let you know as soon as the website is up and running so that we can take a look at it. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions about future webinars, certainly let me know and I'll provide that feedback along.
Right. Thank you so much. All right, moving on with our agenda. We are at the portion of our agenda where we're at the consent items, our consent agenda. I can entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Chair Sutton, this is Monica Johnson-Hostler, and I move that we approve the consent.
Chair Sutton, Bill Fletcher, I second.
Thank you. So I've got a motion from Ms. Johnson-Hostler and a second by Mr. Fletcher to approve tonight's consent agenda as it is posted. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the roll call vote. Mr. Fletcher?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
I think Mr. Hagerty had to step away. Mr. Hagerty, are you with us? Are you back?
I am here. I do have a work conflict, but I'm here for the vote. Aye.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Scott?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Mrs. Kushner?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Tonight's consent agenda is approved. We did not have any items for action. We do not have any action items tonight. So that brings us to our closed session. So, if
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
There is an epic written here. May I make a motion that we go into closed session for the following purposes?
Yes, sir.
To consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11, A1 and A3 and A6. To consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11, A3. To consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3. Due to current litigation, JM versus Wake County Board of Education, 20 CBS 7847, Wake County Superior Court, and JT et al., the De Blasio et al., case number 20 CV 5878 CM, United States District Court, Southern District of New York. To consult with an attorney employed or retained by the board in order to preserve attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the board, and to consult with and instruct board staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the board in negotiation of price and other material terms of a proposed contract for the acquisition of real property in Southwest Wake County / Western Holly Springs, North Carolina area, parens ES XX2, close parens, from seller Karen W. Cody and spouse Christopher C. Cody, parens 10.215 acres, Wake County PIN 0637 483806, and Wake County REID 0075142, and a proposed contract for the acquisition of real property in the southwest Wake County / Western Holly Springs, NC, area ES-XX2, from seller Gregory W. Hobby and spouse Julie K. Hobby, parens 31.681 acres, Wake County PIN 0637-38-8616, and Wake County REID 0047559. To consider confidential student information protected under GS 115C-402 and the Family Educational and Privacy Rights Act 20 USC 1232G.
Mr. Fletcher, thank you. Awesome job there.
Second.
Who was the second? Was that?
Malika.
Okay. Got a motion by Mr. Fletcher and a second by Ms. Johnson Hostler to the closed session for the items just read and as attached to our agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Kushner.
Aye.
Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Aye.
Mrs. Scott.
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty.
Aye.
Mrs. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Aye.
Mr. Fletcher.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Unanimous vote to go into closed session. So with that, that will end our public meeting. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you all to our public comment speakers for, again, presenting the many comments to the board. We will certainly take a look at those and take all of those under consideration. And so again, thanks for the attendance and the participation and the attention. Take care of yourselves and each other, and have a good evening. We'll see you all joining us for the private closed session. See you on the other side. Thank you so much.
work through getting insurance. But again, it is ultimately, I mean, if the board and superintendent have little others on it.
And we, and are being, have to, the city of Raleigh has control over who they hire, who's in their program. See how we can assume. And we're giving them the opportunity to have children in.
Virtual functional staff and with risk management to work this out. I'm getting some feedback.
Is not to claim that
All right, I think we've got everyone here, but since we're in open session, we'll need to do the roll call right quick. Mrs. Kushner.
Here, thank you.
All right, Dr. Martin.
Here.
Mrs. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Hegarty.
Here.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Here.
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Here.
Mr. Fletcher.
Here.
All right, we're all here.
May I make a motion to approve the superintendent's administrative appointment and other recommendations for employment?
I have a motion by Mr. Fletcher and a second from Ms. Johnson Hostler to approve the superintendent's HR recommendations. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Fletcher.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey. Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Mr. Hegarty.
Aye.
Mrs. Scott.
Aye.
Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Ms. Kushner.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Superintendent's HR recommendations are approved.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of an amendment to the offer to purchase and contract for Southwestern Wake County, Western Holly Springs School EXX2. This is an amendment to the purchase agreement with Gregory Hobby and wife and spouse Julie Hobby.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Approve the amendment to offer to purchase and contract Southwestern Wake County, Western Holly Springs ESXX2. Motion by Mr. Fletcher and a second from Ms. Mahaffey. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Mr. Fletcher.
Aye.
Johnson Hostler.
Aye.
Mrs. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Mr. Hegarty.
Aye.
Mrs. Kushner.
Aye.
Dr. Martin. Mrs. Scott.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The offer to amend the purchase is approved.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move an approval of an offer to purchase and contract for land adjacent to what we just approved. This is also in Western Holly Springs, Wake County. Property owned by Karen W. Cody and spouse Christopher C. Cody, approximately 10 acres, real estate PIN 0637483806.
Got a motion by Mr. Fletcher and a second by Ms. Mahaffey. Offer to purchase and contract Southwestern Wake County, Western Holly Springs ESXX2, which is adjacent to the property just approved. Discussion?
Mr. Chair, simply letting the community know that this board continues to to find land and to put it into what we affectionately call a land bank, because there won't be much land left for us, particularly in these faster growing areas of the county. So our real estate services people have put together this tract for a future school. It's not that far out, maybe 24, but it is part of the effort to continue to serve our community well. And this is the purpose of these transactions.
All right, thank you, sir. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Ms. Kushner.
Aye.
Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Mrs. Scott.
Aye.
Mr. Hegarty.
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson Hostler.
Aye.
Mr. Fletcher.
Aye.
Aye as well. Offer to purchase and contract is approved. Unanimous vote of 7-0.
8-0.
8-0. Sorry, Mr. Haggard is not with us. 8-0. Thank you for that.
Not a problem.
Any further business to come before this board?
Mr. Sutton, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion by Ms. Mahaffey and a second by Mr. Fletcher to adjourn tonight's meeting. Any discussion? Hearing absolutely none. Mrs. Scott,
Aye.
Dr. Martin, Mrs. Kushner,
Aye.
Mrs. Fletcher, Mr. Fletcher,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler,
Aye.
Mrs. Mahaffey,
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty.
Wow. Aye.
Vote aye as well. Our meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all so much for your time and attention at this late.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
And all stay safe.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.